Hello again, and welcome to Purgatory. Today I've decided to torment you with the topic of reading, which is totally related to what I've talked about on this channel before. So, I keep hearing people say lots of very scary things like literacy rates are at an all-time low, and that children cannot read, and also that reading is cool now, and reading is in, and reading is whatever. So what's the truth? Well, the truth is both of them, actually. So we can clear that up right now. But it would be more accurate to say that literacy levels are at an all-time low, not literacy rates. We can still read, we just read worse. So the majority of the population being literate at all is still a relatively new thing, historically speaking. So saying literacy rates are at an all-time low is a little bit misleading, in my opinion. I think literacy levels. We're reading at the 3rd grade level, but we are reading. So what's with this reading movement stuff? I say as if a million people haven't already made videos on it, and you probably definitely already know. I will say I have my own biases on this topic. Like, not everyone had their mother's 13-digit library card number memorized so they could go to the library unsupervised, like I did. But this is just a small disclaimer, so if I'm ever like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? There's a chance I'm a tiny bit out of touch. It's small, but it's there, okay? Was reading ever really out of vogue? If reading is in now, and reading is cool now, that implies that it was not before, but I would like to posit that reading has always been cool. Among adults at least. Kids don't give a fuck, they'll be mean about anything. But like, reading has become less popular, or it did become less popular with the advent of like more digital media. But with that, we also saw the explosion of fan fiction, which is reading, whether you like that or not. Fairly certain the longest written work ever in the world is still that one Smash Brothers fan fiction. So also visual novels and like certain types of video games are also very heavy on the reading. Video games tricking the youth once again. It's true there's been like a cultural resurgence in reading as a response to the overstimulating parts of the internet and digital media sphere, but I think about how many fucking copies of Harry Potter J.K. Rowling is sold in like the late 90s and early 2000s, and like she's a billionaire. And Colleen Hoover today is like outselling Jesus in the Bible. Like she's today's evil white lady who sells books. And I think the graph is sort of like a horseshoe shape, you know, like there was a dip there, but we're kind of going back to where we were before. So I get why people are like, reading is in now, but it's also like, we've been reading books, girl. But it is like weird to me that like the idea that being a bookworm has become an aesthetic, as if it weren't an existing identity with like an aesthetic language for years and years and years, that's just like trending right now. The bookworms have been here. It's more popular now, but it's not new. Reading has also like been sexy. Like reading is associated with intelligence, and intelligence has been seen as a desirable trait for eons now. Like, come on. Like, maybe it hasn't always been this glamorized, but the bookworm character has been romanticized since, like, forever. Like, hello, Beauty and the Beast. Because guess who writes books and movies and TV? Writers. And guess what writers like to do? Read. While the appearance of a nerd may have been ridiculed, it has never been uncool to be both hot and read books. Like, that has always been in, like, slay territory. Like, it's never been outside of that. The slayertory. Even in makeover movies, the value of the nerd characters, like, intelligence or smarts, is, like, still maintained. It's not holistically diminished, even in a movie about changing that character, you know? Plus, the only people who make fun of other people for reading, in my own subjective experience, is, like, literal children. Because children will make fun of anyone for anything. I've only ever heard adults make fun of someone for not reading, actually. You know, it's always been a symbol of status and intellect, and it's always been a desirable thing. It was only uncool to read when you were in, like, 7th grade, is my claim. So let's get to the meat of this video. The intellectual book reader person panopticon. So, not to be annoying, but in some ways, I think social media has, like, actualized the panopticon in a more tangible way. Like, everything you're doing might actually be observed and recorded even when you're alone. If you're recording, you're thinking from the perspective of a viewer that does not yet exist, but may exist soon, right? Which obviously behaving as if you were being observed, even if you don't know if you are, is the entire basis of the panopticon. but like it's so literal now that it's weird. Like it's not just the self observing the self, but the self observing the self from the perspective of a massive audience. There's absolutely an element of voyeurism and wanting to be seen involved in the whole like being a person who reads identity thing on social media. It's the panopticon and the principle of self-observation, right? Existing both as an individual and as the observer of the individual leads to participating in activities and behaviors as if you are being watched, even if you are your only audience. Reading and reading the right books can then be a product of performing your own identity to yourself. But that's kind of lonely, isn't it? So it goes on the internet, so everyone can see you performing your identity. Everyone can see you read, and that you read smart people books and not dumb people books. It's like shorthand for depth as a person, intellectually and emotionally. And you know, part of me is tempted to just say like, whatever. We're social animals, we want to be witnessed and perceived, nothing new there. But at the same time, there is also like an acute irony to doing something so still and solitary, so incredibly conspicuously, and I think that's what a lot of people are picking up on is odd when they make fun of this. Sort of like people who give like dark academia decor tips or whatever, and it involves buying vintage books from thrift stores and stacking them up on end tables or filling out bookshelves, but we don't read them. We never read them. Same principle as like those guys on Instagram Reels that will like pose sexy with a open book or like mournfully wander around a library and record it, and there's like a very valid suspicion that his ass is not reading. This is part of the whole coolness factor and panopticon thing, which we just mentioned, but this is also like interestingly a product of men finally realizing that the ladies think it's sexy to read, which makes it an interesting double-edged sword, because if you're caught faking, it's like you're double unsexy for being both a fucking poser and also someone who doesn't read. In a very peculiar and heterosexual way, we have finally somehow managed to birth a movement of people who read born out of a desperation to be found sexy, which like finally it was good for something, am I right? There's another time I saw something, and I don't want to put this girl on blast because I think she's like dead as a teenager, so that would be wrong of me, but it was like a day in my life vlog style video thing where this girl went to a bookstore and like bought like a manga, a book, something, but she made sure to include like a lingering shot of Tolstoy's War and Peace, just like a full 5-second shot lingering on the book on the shelf that she did not buy. You know, but people owning books and displaying books they don't read for the sake of appearances, that's what people have been doing since the dawn of books and owning things. It's nothing new. But it's just so amplified by social media. But even amongst like social media, it's not new. Like we remember like posts of an open book always in the middle, because that's what photographs best, with like the Rio de Janeiro filter and like a latte or something are still floating around from like 2015. So like even on social media, we've been, oh my god, I'm sexually reading this book right now. Like we've been doing that. Flip side of this, I think getting mad at people who actually read because for some reason you have decided that being literate is pretentious and whatever is also like mad stupid. Some people who get mad at you when you like use a word that they don't know instead of being normal about it. If you don't read and you don't know big words, like that's you, girl, that's you. And like, to be fair, there are people who use like really big words just to be insufferable, don't get me wrong, but like you can so tell when someone's doing it on purpose. I feel like it's so obvious because they kind of use them wrong a little bit, you know, like they use the word in a way that's like, if you know what the word means, you might raise an eyebrow and you're like, I don't know if that word means what you think it means. So an additional angle to this very smart book reader person panopticon is the perceptions and, dare I say, nitpicking about what the right books are to be reading. You know, my mom was dropping me off at the airport once and saw the like book talk table at an airport bookstore and was like, what the fuck does that mean? And I explained it to her and she was just like, well, whatever gets people to read, I don't care if it's smut. And like, mind you, my mother has a degree in English and a master's and was a high school English teacher, and she was like, fuck it, I don't care if they read porn, at least they're reading. Damn. I also spoke with someone I had recently made friends with, and she said something along the lines of how she used to only read nonfiction, and then she realized she was being annoying and started reading more fun, romancy books as well, and now that's most of what she reads. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm actually friends with a few of the book talk girlies in real life, and they're like mad chill. I think there is a separation, perhaps, between some of the content creators in the space and the average reader. However, I do think a lot of criticism of book talk stems from how performative and aggressive certain creators can be about how much they read. Like, they have end of the year stat sheets, you know? So when someone is like so upfront about this, and then you look closer and it was like 75% smut, which, no shame, contextualized sex is the best kind, some people are going to start feeling like you're trying to make yourself sound smarter and more well-read than you really are. And I think there's an air of frustration and resentment. I think it's a combination of some people feeling insecure that they don't read that much, and then also judgmental of what other people are reading. And those things combined means that they like to make fun of people on book talk. It is worth conceding, however, that this does mean that publishers prioritize like romance, smut, and YA fantasy over other genres because it's more profitable. So like books get sold, but the market's not super diverse. It has made it very hard to find good fiction books without central romances for the lead characters, which, to be clear, I'm not like a romance hater, I'm just not a romance lover. Like, I need it to be a B plot at least. I don't dislike romance, I'm just very picky and I don't like it most of the time. It's like a souffle, you have to cook it just right. And it's also worth noting that some of these romance books prioritize spice and entertainment above all else, including quality sometimes on occasion, dare I say. But they are fun, and there's nothing wrong with reading a fun, entertaining book. There's been a panic about like trashy women's literature taking over ever since women were allowed to learn how to read. It's sort of like those guys who were like bemoaning the end of democracy when women got the right to vote. Like, they're just whiners. Obviously, on top of all this, we still have like the issue of like our literacy levels are not super awesome right now. Reading more difficult books would be something that could improve that, and I do know a number of people who either recently or are currently getting English or creative writing degrees that have reported to me that through class discussions it has become clear that an alarming number of English and writing majors have not read or even heard of like many cornerstone works of literature, and they seem pretty concerned about that, and I understand why. There's also that article that like every YouTuber and their mom has been talking about, like the Rose Horowitz article from The Atlantic, where they're complaining about how like students get to college and they're like, what do you mean I have to read the whole book? I get this to an extent because I would agree that a lot of middle and high school curriculum is structured around optimizing everything for standardized testing, which is like its own massive problem with the American education system, but that's for another day. So kids are reading like articles and excerpts. This is what I hear from this article anyway. But like, I saw some of the excerpt craze in high school when we did like test prep and whatever, but most of my teachers still made me read full books, like middle and high school, like several books. They had me out there reading Hemingway and shit, so I'm not completely sold on this, because I went to a public school. Like, I was not at like a fancy private prep school, I was at the public school down the street from my house, and they were making me read full books. My take on this is I think full books do get assigned, we just have Spark Notes now. So you can really easily get away with not reading the fucking book at all. So kids do not, they're getting assigned books, they're just not reading the books like they're supposed to. Like, we've all been over how screens lower attention spans, but they also make it easier to cheat by a mile. Plus, it's like way more socially acceptable, I think, than it used to be to just cheat and like not do the assigned reading, to the point where it's like I found myself in multiple awkward social situations because I had done the reading like some kind of nerd, when it was not only socially accepted but expected that no one had done it. So that's all to say that, like, yes, I would agree that like maybe we should try and have some more educational literature mixed in to our reading palette. However, I think insisting upon only reading Dostoevsky or Sylvia Plath or Tolstoy or whatever is annoying in the opposite direction. You are not better than other people on the basis that you read books that are only 50 years old or older. I wouldn't call it elitist the way some other people do, though, because in my opinion there's nothing exclusive about having access to and reading some of the most popular and widely produced books in all of history. Sort of like how reading the Bible can never be elitist because they are just handing those things out left and right. Like, I have like 4 full-size copies of the Bible, and I'm not even religious, they just like give them to you, it's weird. But anyway, it's equally performative as like the stats sheet to only post about how much you hate smut and love Crime and Punishment. You masochist. Pretending you are superior for only reading like nonfiction and poetry as well is dumb as hell. Like, it's okay to have preferences, but liking one genre more than another does not make you smarter than other people. Lots of very stupid people have read War and Peace. I've basically already said this, but the solution is like moderation. Like, whatever, you know? Heard of it. Boring answer, but like, at the end of the day, a culture that values and prioritizes reading and intelligence is not a bad thing in my eyes. I just need y'all to commit a little harder and actually read the book while you're trying to look mysterious. Making reading cool and sexy is perhaps the most effective way to solve any kind of problem with literacy levels. The thing I am like most interested in about all of this isn't the literacy levels or like whether or not it's cool to read or any of that. The thing that I care about is the performative sexy man reading on social media, because I think that is so fucking funny. And also interesting, because it's like more so than any other generation, Gen Z can be deeply performative and deeply concerned with how they're perceived. So it's like the panopticon is like full steam ahead, right? And I know there's some people who are going to be like, shut the fuck up about the panopticon, I don't want to hear it. Because I know people love to just name drop that in conversation sometimes to sound smart, so fair. But I just think it's so interesting that like we have this self-observational, I'm recording a video of myself with a book trying to look mysterious and sexy and then posting it, but it's very unclear whether or not I read the book, but whether or not I read the book is the thing that would be sexy and or attractive. So we're being the most ambiguous about the most important part of this performance. So I know a bunch of people have made videos about like book talk and the trend of reading and whatever. I'm definitely not like breaking new ground. I just thought some thoughts about it and I wanted to say them, and you're stuck with it now because you're all the way here at the 24-minute mark. 23, whatever, ballpark. Thanks for sticking with me this long. As a special treat for watching the whole video, here are my book recommendations of dubious quality.